Good morning. Welcome to National Diversity Coalition. This is our third virtual coffee break. I just want to start with the Congressional Review Act resolution introduced by the House Financial Services Committee, Chair Representative Maxine Waters and Congressman Gregory Meeks, to overturn the new CRA reform has come as a shock to all of us. The OCC last month revamped the long-due reform of Community Reinvestment Act law, a 1977 law that requires financial institutions to meet the credit needs of their communities. The last revisions to the regulations were made in 1995. That is 25 years back, a quarter of a century. To the ones paying attention, CRA's objective had become stiff by implementing outdated regulations which has failed to keep pace with the technological advancements and the economic transformations around the world. The OCC was on the right track and correctly and timely adopted the CRA reform in a time when the world is facing a global pandemic and has an accompanying adverse impact on the communities, particularly the low-income communities. The CRA reform was the need of the hour. The resolution to overturn CRA reform overshadows and neglects the tireless amount of work and thoughts put in by the OCC and the other financial regulators, along with leaders of the industry and many nonprofit organizations like National Diversity Coalition. The hopes of the people have been shattered. 10 years have gone in the making, 2 years of collecting and researching data. There have been 7,500 formal comments submitted to OCC on the CRA reform. Thousands of town hall meetings, hearings, and dialogues through various channels have been conducted all over the country. OCC, being a regulatory body, is sanctioned to regulate banks. It is demoralizing for a regulator that breathes work all day and has been working tirelessly to create a regulation that is true to its worthy objectives and help the communities we serve. In today's discussion, we will address the misconceptions behind the new CRA regulation. First and foremost, I would like to say that this is not perfect, and neither can it be. Law is dynamic and changing every day with new regulations. This brings to the fact that the CRA law needs modernization more than ever now. Moreover, even if it's not perfect, it doesn't make any sense to scrap it altogether and let go of the work done by regulators in vain. I find it disrespectful to discredit the thousands of hours that professionals dedicated out of their time to change an obsolete regulation. The modernized CRA aimed at increased transparency, quantitative measurement, systematic public reporting, and accountability. While bringing flexibility, the CRA reform would reduce accountability issues that have hampered the efforts of community-based organizations and result in more creative and effective solutions for lending and investments needed to help LMI communities. A formal measurement to assess rating levels of the banks would ensure transparency and actual benchmarks for the banks to achieve. We cannot be continuing with the old informal benchmarks used by regulators, especially in this era. Even the banks need this. The banks also will benefit greatly from a systematic plan for them to act upon. Revising data collection, record keeping, and more reporting fulfills that. The CRA reform focused on both the number as well as the amount of loans to the communities. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, NBC and NAAC immediately found ways to assist people that were affected financially and would be affected in times to COVID, post-COVID. I thank God that CRA had last a final ruling before it meant that we as community leaders are in position to help more LMI communities. This is exactly what we need. God knows former Comptroller Joseph Otting's heart and the regulatory team of OCC, as well as the FDIC's wonderful and fine team. Truth will always prevail. And you know, this is a 98 days of shelter in place and things has changed. So I would like to welcome a very good friend, a very dynamic, a big heart, all the positive adjectives that I can explain to former Comptroller Joseph Otting. Joseph?
Good morning, Faith, and thank you everybody on the phone. It's an honor to be here. As Faith referenced, I left my official role with the OCC on May 29th and really look forward to continuing on the journey of making sure that low to moderate income communities across America receive their fair share. And as I think most of us realize, the American dream needs to be alive and well, and that everybody has to feel like they have hope for their next generations. And so one of the tasks that I took on when I went to Washington, D.C. was clearly I thought of working with, as a financial institution across communities across America, was we could do better. And we needed to do better so more dollars could flow into those communities across America. But just as important is people needed to understand the rules and how things were done. And so we took on four, I think, key things with CRA. We took on what qualifies. And as odd as this may sound, since 1977, when this regulation was originally enacted, there was never a list of actually what qualifies for CRA. So as we traveled around the country, people would say to me, well, why does community development organizations not qualify? Why does a community center? Why does not financial education? And most of the times I would say, well, they do. And they would say, well, that's not what my bank told me. And so really the first big bucket was pulling all together amongst the three agencies of what qualifies. And today we have a list now in the rule that allows you to go and very quickly make a determination whether something qualifies or not. And I think that's a monumental element to this new rule, is giving clarities to communities, civil rights organizations, banks, community organizers. If you want to do something in your community, does it sit on that list? That list is not conclusive, because you also have the right to come into the OCC and be able to say, look, it's not on the list, but is this something that could qualify for CRA? And it's our intent over the years that we'll keep that list up together. The second part that we decided to take on is, where does CRA qualify? And there was a lot of confusion about when banks narrowed, like to small assessment areas or to geographic areas. And what we found is, in large communities, often on one side of the street, a project would qualify for a bank, but on the other side of the street, the project wouldn't, because it was out of their assessment area. And so we've offered up examples now where, I spent a big time portion of my banking career in Southern California. I was often confused by why on one side of the street that was in LA County, we got CRA credit, but on the other side of the street in Santa Ana, we didn't, because we didn't have that as an assessment area. And so we've now straightened that out, where banks can broaden their assessment areas where they have retail banking. The third was the measurement. And the interesting thing about the measurement was, as we traveled across the United States, we asked thousands of people, how does the regulator measure a bank's performance in CRA, and your ability to understand that? And believe it or not, of the 1,000 people that we asked, 2 people got it right. And so it really made us realize that what we needed to do is get a measurement tool in place that everybody could understand, that you could easily be able to look up, and you could understand not only what your bank or financial institution did in your community, but more importantly, how did they do that against a basis of deposits? And so the third area was, we built, not only at the individual geographic area, a bank has to pass both units and dollars, but also at the top of the bank, they have to pass dollars in relationship to their deposits. And then the third characteristic of that is that then we use examiner judgment to be able to look at and say, well, how did the bank do? And I would say what we've tried to focus on there is, today we're probably 80% subjective and 20% objective. We've now given the communities and bankers and regulators an 80% objective way to look at this, but also leave the judgment of the examiner based upon how did the bank perform in their specific market. The fourth area was, how are we going to report that data? And today, if most of you know, the large banks, their CRA reports come out a year or two after the assessment period. One particular bank, it's about 28 pages long, very complicated, very difficult, did not look at all the markets that the bank actually operated in. And it was our goal that going forward, a bank will be evaluated in every geographic area to which they have retail banking activities. But just as important, the internet banks that are a new wave of the way I believe people are going to do banking in the future often, just use the assessment area where they were geographically located, and they missed out on all those deposits that they raised across the United States from doing community reinvestment activities within those particular markets. So take an entity headquartered in Salt Lake City. Generally they Salt Lake City, but most of their deposits were coming from LA and San Francisco and Chicago and New York and Miami. The new rule will require them to go into those communities and support those communities to which they take deposits. So 4 key things: what qualifies, where it qualifies, how we're going to measure it, and then the 4th is the reporting. There's a lot more elements to CRA that I think could be improved, but those were the 4 that we worked on. Faith started the conversation and talking a little bit about what they call CRA on CRA. The Congressional Review Act gives legislation the ability to look at rules that are done by various government entities. And I just want to comment on that this was a very long process. Faith made reference. We started this journey at the OCC really when I got there in December of 2017. But this had been going on really for 10 years prior to my arrival, that any particular rule, and in this particular case, it's been 25 years since it's been changed. And all I can say to people is think about if you're driving a 25-year-old car versus an automobile that's a 2020, you have better transmission, you got better suspension, you got better gas mileage. We were trying to bring CRA into the modern world so we could be able to, I think, make it more impactful in communities across America. So what we did is, just to walk you through the process, is in August of 2018, the OCC issued what we called an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. A number of you supported that by answering our questions that we had put in there. We gathered the questions from that, and we really spent between December of 2018 all the way until last year in 2019, we issued what we called a notice of proposed rulemaking. We then gathered more questions from people of as we proposed what the rule would look like. And then we took the period of time from the comment period to the end of May of taking what we heard, and we made, literally, there's a list, probably 50 modifications to what the final rule looked like. And so there's 2 ways that people can challenge this particular rule. There's the Congressional Review Act, and what will happen there is Congress will have a vote. If they elect that they feel like it should be overturned, then they will send it over to the Senate, and the Senate then will have a vote. And if it's a majority in the Senate, then it'll go to the president's desk, and then the president will have a choice whether he wants to sign it or not. And so I think this whole process will be resolved in probably the next 90 to 120 days. And then the second way it could be overturned is there's a process of how we followed the appropriate rules through the program. Did we document, our changes? Did we listen to the comments? Did we take the information that was provided to us and made a decision whether we thought it was the right decision or not? And so I couldn't be more thrilled. The OCC provides oversight to 70% of the assets associated with CRA. The significant portion, the FDIC is 15% and the Fed is 15%. And today there's roughly $485 billion a year that is created by the Community Reinvestment Act of banks investing in communities. And I would ask all of you is, we have to understand where that money's going, and is it really meeting its mark, so to speak, with those dollars as we kind of make sure that they are supporting communities. And people often said to me, well, why now, and why did you do this? The reason I did it is because, one of the things that I think that we've all proven is we do have income disparity. We do have ownership disparity. CRA has not helped that over the last 25 years. And by bringing all these new measurement programs in place, we think that will flow more dollars into low to moderate income across America and give all of us the ability to be able to measure that and make a decision. Are those dollars going to the right places in communities across America? So it's an honor to be here with each of you today. I think we're going to have a panel of questions. And so, Faith, I'll turn it back over to you. And then if we have time, I'll make a closing statement at the end as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Very detailed explanation. I'm going to call Jackson Brossi, Executive Director, Native CDFI Network. The Native CDFI's network mission is to be a national voice and advocate that strengthens and promotes Native community development, financial institutions. And I'm excited on the CRA because never before that the Native CDFI is part of the equation. So, Jackson, thank you for joining. I'll pass it on to you.
Well, great. Yeah, I'm Jackson, and really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us, Faith, and great to see you again, Joseph. I really wanted to say thank you for focusing on this issue, and then also listening to Native CDFIs in the process. And I guess while I'm here, I think it's worth noting for me to remind folks about what Native community development financial institutions do is they step in where other lenders are not. And our folks are really rural, really across the country, and I think really fit that definition of operating in credit deserts. And so when the CRA was initially designed, I think a lot of folks, like where I'm from, where you drive about an hour just to go to a bank, are not included in some of the things the CRA could benefit our communities with. And so we're really appreciative of how the new CRA regulations have looked at that and have listened to us. And it was good to see you, Joseph, out in New Mexico back when I had shorter hair, back when you could get a haircut. But that trip to, I guess, listening session, which I think you did a few across the country, was really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to lending opportunities in Native American communities. So we focus right near the Albuquerque area, but if we could really go dive deeper and drive 3 hours away and be even further deeper in the credit deserts. So really appreciate your leadership and focus and initiative on that. And I think your team at the OCC did a good job of following up and making sure that they listened to our comments. So thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Faith.
Well, Faith, can I make a quick, Jackson, thank you. It was very enlightening for me when we had the chance. I tell the story that when I was a young man, my father met the chief on the Indian reservation in South Dakota, and always supported them and the blight that those people, went through of struggling in America. So always have been relatively close to Indian country since a young boy. But when you go out to Indian country and you see the need for education, for healthcare, for infrastructure, for housing, people having to leave the Indian country to go to larger communities to be able to get housing, you see the need. And then basically they were starved that there wasn't clarification that Indian country could qualify for CRA. And I think by doing that, we will see more dollars now flowing in with greater clarification into Indian country. And I would take great pride if 10 years from now that we could look back and say the changes to CRA allowing the clarification flowed those dollars into Indian country and what it's done for them, I think would be a great payback of Americans to the Indian community.
And I think, when you talk about the income disparity, wealth disparity, we all know that the native country is suffering from that. So this is why Jackson is so supportive of CRA. But Jackson, before I introduce B, do you have any question to Joseph, just clarifying how the native country will be helped on the CRA? If you have any comments or questions.
I guess one more thing I'd like to add is, so about a month ago, we did a quick survey of our membership, and we have about 70 Native CDFIs across the country. And 76% said that they did not think that their banks that they were working with were getting CRA credit for their work. And so that really underlines the hope and the opportunity we think we have here with these new regulations. So thanks.
Yeah, and you know, Jackson, the thing that you might do if they don't have, and trust me, you know, when you enter the government space, sometimes not knowing where everything is and rules and all that, is to get your hand on the list of qualifying activities. And clearly CDFIs and Indian country are identified on those lists, that you could distribute that. And so when people start to have dialogue with their local financial institution, they can point it out for them. Because I agree with you, the Indian country was a significant change of saying that those activities would qualify for CRA at the top of the bank. But CDFIs, both lending to CDFIs and providing equity to CDFIs, were always intended to be CRA qualifying activities. But as we got out, we found because it wasn't clarity on that, some regulators did not give credit for that and some did. And I do think, you know, hopefully 12 months from now, we've kind of broken through that everybody realizes the CDFI activities qualify for CRA.
Great. Next is B. Stacher, a CEO of New Capital LLC. They're also Women Business Center here in Los Angeles. And B, thank you for joining, and thank you also for being an advisory board of NVC.
Thank you for having me. And before I ask my question, I just want to thank NAAC and especially Faith for being able to organize the sector and helping us understand more objectively the importance of what you have been able to accomplish. So thank you for that. We've all been trying very hard for years to make sure that CRA was an equalizer, but as you know, the old rules never applied to the environment that we're currently under with the web and everything else. What I think I'd like to just focus on a couple of things is one, you know, the bank has made $896 billion of income. And of that, I think about close to 4% is generated by fees, you know, sufficient fund fees and late fees and things like that, which equates to about $34 billion, which is pretty astonishing. And then when you trickle it down and you see that's only 475 million is credited to investments of low-income communities through CRA, I think what you have done to ensure transparency of the data is going to be extremely beneficial. And also, I believe that the rules also help us to better understand how all banks are going to be treated equally, whether they're on, you know, traditional banks that have offices versus what we have now in the web in terms of fintech and all of that, the banks that are on the web that are doing much better in the fee structure, but you have no way of understanding how they're investing in communities. This COVID, you know, has impacted women more than anything else, especially women-owned businesses. How do you see the new rules really favoring banks to do more investment in those communities, especially for women-owned businesses? That's one. And do you see a change in how nonprofits and CDFIs can be greater partners given the new rules?
Well, on the CDFIs, I think just clarification that they qualify. Well, you know, I'm hopeful shortly, you know, as banks now see the list, you won't have to start with the conversation of do you qualify or not. It's going to be immediately, do they qualify? And then what are your activities? And is it supporting, you know, housing or small business lending in the community? So I do think we will see substantial inflow of dollars into CDFIs going into the future. One of the kind of ahas for me as we traveled across the United States and talked to the CDFIs, there were two things that got into the final rule that really were a reflection of the feedback we received as we traveled around. The first being that equity was the most complicated thing for CDFIs to attract. And what people usually said to me is, when we get the equity, then finding the lending dollars are relatively easy. And so the final hasn't been, the examination process had been concluded, but we introduced the concept of the multiplier. And what we said was, as a concept, you could get $2 or $3 of credit of equity for every dollars of debt. And what we wanted to do was help motivate people to, in the hardest areas from the standpoint of attracting money so CDFIs, can be formed to continue to function and continue to grow. The other part that we learned through traveling across the geographic markets, under the old format, the investment window was a 3-year window. In other words, everything a bank did in a 3-year window got credit, and that's the way we generally looked at CRA examination periods in 3-year increments. So often, financial institutions were motivated to do relatively short-term investments or lending. And so what we heard from a lot of CDFIs is the business needs a 5-year loan, or the low to moderate income housing needs a 7-year loan. I'm being pushed to do a 2 or 3-year maturity loan when I need something that's more long-term. And so by going to the perpetuality of what's on the bank's balance sheet, now banks have no motivation to do the short-term loan. If you need 7 years and the business model proves that, then they should be agnostic whether they do a 2 or 7. But you, as the person doing the lending or the project, are going to be able to lock that money in longer. And the bank, it won't matter to the bank. If the dollar's on the books on year 1 and it's on the books on the bank on year 7, they're still going to get credit for that dollar. And I think that is a really significant material change, meaning the perpetual nature of those dollars incents banks to hold on to those equity and those lending instruments over a longer period of time.
So longer, hopefully more credit.
Longer, yes. I definitely think just by us being able to educate everybody that CDFIs qualify both the equity and the lending will open up, in my mind, significantly, because I think one thing we found really since 2008 is CDFIs have played such a valuable role in communities across America, where the banks haven't, they're not as integrated into the community, but the CDFIs are. And when you bring those leaders together and support the CDIF lending in those communities, we've seen a substantial increase in the benefit that communities can receive from CDFI activities.
Thank you for that. It really is going to make a big difference.
I think so.
Faith, you're muted.
You're on mute, Faith.
Sorry. So I hope, the Women Business Center will benefit a lot. There's a lot of women business throughout the country. And my understanding is they're not getting a lot of help out there.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, one of the things people maybe were critical of us is we said any financial consulting will qualify for CRA if it's done in the community. People thought it should be just low to moderate income. But our viewpoint is there is such a need for financial literacy training across America that limiting it just to low to moderate income, people would probably hinder, I think, the growth of U.S. citizens on financial, their ability to understand financial. And then more importantly, we also clarified that, kind of community centers where people are doing job training and financial counseling would qualify for CRA as well. So I think, what you're doing there will add great benefit and get CRA qualification going forward.
Great. Thank you, B. So encourage all the Women Business Center to sign up to make sure that the CRA will not be appealed, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Next is Everett Sands. Everett is the CEO, board member of Lendustry. Lendustry provides economic opportunities and progressive for small business owners, and they understand communities as a source of finance and financing and financial institution. Everett, I want to congratulate you. You're doing a fantastic job. There are over 200 million CDFI, and they've done so well on PPP. Congratulations, Everett. And please talk about the Lendustry and things that can do more. We want you to be 100 million so you can help a lot of the African American businesses.
Yeah. So thank you, NAAC and Faith for the opportunity. Thank you, Joseph. Good to see you again, and good to see you on the West Coast. Home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So for those who do not know, Lendistry is a small business and commercial real estate lender. We try our best to focus on predominantly underserved areas as everybody else, but we have some intentionality where we focus on African American, Hispanic, Latino, and women-owned businesses. For PPP, as Faith mentioned, we did make a decision to focus on predominantly African American areas. Naturally, we saw that a lot of banking institutions made a decision that they would focus on their clientele. SBA's data and research says that there's not been any time in the last decade in which greater than 3% of SBA loans have went to African Americans. And so we felt we had to be very intentional. We chose 12 different states across the country, made some specific inroads in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Atlanta for obvious reasons because of their populations. And then we had an opportunity to partner with Goldman Sachs as our lender, and then Citizens Business Bank as our banker. And we've distributed, we're coming up right on about 175 million in PPP loans. We're also working with several states to release money for the CARES Act. Our goal this year is to push at least 500 million into underserved communities. So that's a little bit about us. We have the I guess the foresight, and now it's become a blessing, I guess, to have invested significantly in technology. We believe that technology was the great equalizer, as we wanted to find a way to do scalable underserved lending. And so for the last 4 years, we've really focused on tech as that entry point, because we found that underserved communities generally are not available during what we would call traditional bank hours, 9 to 5. We had a lot of single mothers. We had a lot of people who just had a lot of personal things they would do from kind of 5 to 9 hour. And so we saw that a lot of business owners really needed a solution that was 24/7. So not only weekends, but late nights and different things like that. And so we really focused on that. Joseph, my question is going to be, well, first of all, I think let me back up. I just want to say the amount of time spent in trying to do CRA reform. I liked your analogy of the car. I will not drive a 25-year-old car for a variety of reasons, but I liked your analogy of the car. I think the first thing is just to thank you and your team for even having the fortitude to make the attempt to try CRA reform. And I think the hours spent in going around city to city, neighborhood to neighborhood, organization to organization really needs to be commended. I want to ask you, and I'm going to focus specifically on Blacks and Black people, right? Because that's what I care about and that's who I am. When you look at things like unemployment, as a result of the pandemic, it's 300% June through March. When you look at the amount of businesses that are closing, 22% for call it the nation. And then when you get to Hispanic Latinos, it jumps up to 32%. And African Americans is 41% based on the University of California, Santa Cruz study. And then when you hear people like Robert Smith's, whose words are actually very similar to B's, roughly $1 trillion, 985 billion has been made by banks and corporate entities in the last decade. And his solution, why I know it would be hard to implement, is rather simple. And it says, why don't we just take 2% of those net profits and why don't we pour them into the community? And I want to be very clear, because 2% is a drastically different number than the 485 million. It's 1.6 billion. It's 400% of what is currently being done. And I want to be clear that that's only for the African American community. That doesn't include our brown sisters and brothers, our Asians, our low to moderate income who are white. And so to me, that means the numbers are drastically off. But when you hear solutions like what Robert Smith is saying, one, has there been any analysis to say, once these reform measures have been put in, what will be the effect? Because I think the worst thing that could happen is you did all of this work and we have a continuing wealth gap or moves up a couple percentage points. Or two, have you thought about other ways where we can have catalytic and exponential increase in investments, considering one, we're coming out of a pandemic, or we will be coming out of a pandemic, and two, how far behind we actually are right now. Thank you.
So Everett, first of all, if I had my way, I think the ability, the banking industry is one that through CRA legislation kind of led the way to saying this is part of your normal business operating model. And so if you think since 1977, parts of banks management, parts of the strategy, part of the execution in the communities, all kind of is required for them to be able to focus on low to moderate income communities within the communities to which they operate. I think the big opportunity is here. What you have is a lot of great thinking right now about how do we change the direction of our nation that gives everybody hope. I do think the opportunity zone is one channel for that. However, why can't we gravitate towards something like CRA being much broader, and that all corporations take on some kind of social responsibility that they're going to serve their local community. You know, they're going to serve the Black businesses that are most hard hit. They're going to provide the capital for people to start new businesses. That's the conversation that I think we need to have today is, how do we take 485 billion and make it 600 billion? And that's kind of what we're thinking in the banking industry. I can tell you, I spoke to every CEO of the major banks across America, and they have an interest to do more. But without objective ways to measure what they're doing, then that's where we gave them the tool now to be able to say, we're going to give you the tools to tell you how we're measuring it. We're going to tell you what you can do. And then let's see if you can meet the criteria against your deposits, because wherever you're taking deposits, in my mind, that's where you should be servicing that local community. But I think there's a lot of conversations that have to take place, because you can't argue this, not only the statistics you quoted, but when you look at Black ownership in America, we have a serious, the way to wealth in America, we all know historically, is through home ownership. But we also have a declining, percentage of Black ownership in America that has to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks for the time, Faith.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Everett. So there are some questions. Panelists, you can always ask any more questions if you forgot something. So this question is from Pastor Jack Miranda. What are one or two important points to make to my Democratic Congresswoman Linda Sanchez in favor of the CRA reform? Good question.
You want me to answer that, Faith?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So first of all, I would go back to, we haven't changed this rule since 1977. Are you happy with what's going on in Black, Brown, Asian, low to moderate income communities across America? My guess is everybody would answer no. So, everybody knows the definition of insanity is to continue to do what we're doing today. And so, first of all, I don't think anybody's happy where we are, or you shouldn't be happy where we are. So then how do we move this forward? And if people want to debate the list, we can debate the list. We've debated the list. We've talked to thousands of people. If you want to debate the assessment areas, we can debate the assessment area. If you want to debate the measurement, we can debate the measurement. If you want to debate the reporting, we can always debate those and have dialogue. This rule, unfortunately, hasn't been touched since 1977. It doesn't mean it can't be touched every 2 years to make it better. But we put a stake in the ground saying, here is the big step forward to be able to bring accountability and understanding for everybody on this phone call, but just as important, all Americans who really want to understand what's going on in their community. For the first time ever, we're giving you that vehicle to understand it by providing objective formats to which we're going to ask institutions to qualify their activities and report them. And today, it's impossible for anybody to go in and really understand what's going on. We had to go through all the bank's performance evaluations to come up with the numbers. We really got to get this to the point where we can look at it and understand it collectively, what's being done in Los Angeles, in Miami, in San Francisco, in Barstow, in Bend, Oregon. We have to be able to move forward and understand that. So the 2 points I would make, Jack, was it hasn't worked. It isn't working. We've got to change it. We've got to move forward. We think we put together the framework for us to start that process. I'm hopeful maybe a year from now or from now, the OCC and the FDIC and the Fed can all come together and continue to move this forward as we look at how else can we do things effectively to make more dollars flowing into low to moderate income areas. And just as important, ever to your point, is are they being effective? That's really what we have to make a determination.
Great. Charles Dorsey wants to ask a question, so Charles, get ready. But Cora Oriel has a question. What will you do now as a private citizen to save the CRA reform you instituted?
Well, I don't really know. I went to Washington with three big goals in mind. One was to look at the OCC and make sure that it operated in the most efficient manner that it could. And the way we made decisions, the way we responded to people, the way we interacted with the communities. And I think we did all that. We dramatically, I think, improved the efficiency of the agency. We took out over $100 million of cost in the agency, money that was being spent that, in my mind, could be used for other things. Second of all, in addition to CRA, one of the most proudest things I'm happy about was we introduced small ticket lending back into the banking industry. For a lot of you on the phone, you may not realize in 2013, the regulators basically forced banks out of small ticket lending. And so what happened then, people went to the worst possible choices. And not that these people are bad, but people that operate check cashing and payday lending and pawn shop, that was the only choice for people because banks weren't doing it. And so before I left, we also implemented guidance on small ticket lending to encourage banks to get back into this, do it in a fair and equitable way for people, but give those people choices who, don't today to get that borrowing from a bank at a reasonable interest rate versus paying exorbitant interest rate. And then the third was, to decentralize a lot of the decision making. So people that you all interact with from the OCC have authority to interact with you in a manner of decision making. And so it was our responsibility to make sure that our people understood the policies and procedures and they could implement those locally without everything having to come back to Washington. And so I think Faith, and Jen knows, and a lot of my friends on the call today know, I always have an interest in supporting the communities and specifically the communities of low to moderate income people across America. And so that will definitely be part of my future. But in the interim, I'm kind of moving around a little bit. And it's been many years since I've been able to do that.
Great. Charles Dorsey, you want to unmute and you can ask your question?
For sure.
Happy Father's Day. First
Thank
Father's
you.
Day of Charles.
It's been good. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great. Hey, Charles, I looked at your picture. Do you have a beard going now?
I do, man. I got a little bit going on here. Quarantine style right now, so please my roughness. You've been such an outstanding leader, and we're thankful for that. That emerged out of years of investment, long before you got to where you are. This has allowed us to really answer some questions when CRA was not performing well. And my concern is we know that transition is, it just happens. And so we're not sure if we're going to be able to maintain the same level of relationship that allows us to do the advocacy that we're doing now. I'm interested in if you have any advice for us. Like, I wish that there was a set of core values or some rules, like this is what you have to do if you're going to maximize this position, but we don't have that. Can you give us some advice about what to do in the event when your time comes to move to your next promotion or your next space? Like, how do we stay grounded in our relationships and leverage the new rules the way we were able to really maximize the older ones?
Sure. Well, thank you, Charles, and good to hear from you as well. And I chuckled when I saw your picture. Well, first of all, I think the playbook that NBC and NAC uses, where you go to Washington and Faith, coordinates in a number of the most important, agencies in Washington come to hear you in the issues that you're all facing in the community across America. That is, front and center from the standpoint of maintaining those relationships broadly, both at the congressional and the agency and the White House and Treasury. And then within the OCC specifically, there is a group of people that I could not have been more proud of. We met virtually every day in 2020. We met, 3 times a week in 2019, where we were moving the OCC CRA rule forward. And the really great things about that, people like Provetta and Barry and Bao Win and Jonathan Gould, all are still there. And this wasn't, Joseph Otting leading this. This was OCC saying this is the right thing to do. And then I couldn't be more pleased with my replacement, Brian Brooks. I've worked with Brian side by side. I've seen Brian's commitment to the community as well. I know Faith is going to have a meeting with him next week. You'll find Brian to be just as engaged as I was. He's from a small town in Colorado. He understands the need for engagement with nonprofit organizations and that they play such a critical role of what we need to get done in America. So I think, keep doing what you're doing, and then the outreach to people like Brian and interacting with Provetta and Barry and Bao. That's the team that's at the OCC to bring this to the finish line. And they're all, incredibly committed to, what we started with the rule, but still has to be finalized through the examination procedure.
Well, yeah, and before you get out, I really do think, it would be a significant statement to kind of pin that, just leave it on the desk and tape it there, staple it down, so that whoever sits in that seat can understand. I mean that. I think we don't do a good job at passing down models that really work well. And this might be a good tradition to implement as part of the just OCC of the things that worked and the things that were not so helpful. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Charles. Joseph, do you have any update on Wall Street lending? There's a lot of concerns that PPP was not big enough, and we know that. And by the way, PPP, they have done $500 billion, 939,789,000. So we know SBA has done a fantastic job, and especially Secretary Mnuchin. Is there any update on Wall Street lending?
I don't, Faith, have an update at. I know they're constantly looking at the criteria to make sure that it can reach as many businesses as necessary. And you've seen, they've announced some changes to the terms and conditions that I think will make it more favorable. But I don't have an update on that I could share. I would comment on the PPP program. That was a remarkable setup. If you put it in the context of the dollar amounts being over $500 billion would represent the 6th biggest bank in the United States today. And basically that got set up in 2 weeks. And so you're always going to have some stumbles and fumbles. But I can't describe to you the number of times, people have come up to me and said, knowing that I was the comptroller, thank you, that helped save my business, because without that PPP program, I would not have been able to reopen my doors. And I was able to retain my employees, so I didn't lose my employees. So it wasn't perfect. It didn't get to all the businesses that we wished it would have. But I do think it did give a number of companies a lifeline to be able to get to the other side of this COVID. And God help us if we have, another major, infestation, because I'm fearful what that will do to small businesses across America, because they are the, generally the least capitalized and the least amount of liquidity, and they work, 10 hours a day to try to keep their business in shape. And I'm frightful that, if we had another issue, that these businesses would be severely impacted.
No, I agree. I cannot thank SBA enough. I can't imagine their sleepless nights. They did 14 years worth of loans in 14 days. I'm sure Secretary Mnuchin, Administrator Jovita Carranza, and all my friends at SBA that usually I can talk, they're so busy, but they're very responsive. So no, I really thank them for that. Martha Montoya, Martha is the queen of the farmers. So Martha, go ahead.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much. You tailor it for us in the farming area. Thank you. Any comments on that? Because my question is, having gone through this for 1.5 to 2 years, the industry at large, the ag industry, produce industry, the all the industry, which is farming, is completely disconnected to this whole CRA. Literally, it's like, no, that's a USDA, that's the FCA, and let them deal with it. But in the meantime, we keep losing every single day, farmer after farmer, and this whole supply chain broke down a lot of them. We might not recuperate them. The supermarket industry is doing very well, but the farmers, especially minority farmers, are completely depleted because, again, this whole process was first the businesses in urban, and everybody forgot that we have to be fed, and the food supply chain was broken. Any comments on that, Joseph? And within this whole reporting, is farming part of that?
We clearly heard both back when I was with One West Bank, and then you have carried the torch for the family farm and small farmers, that in the modification of CRA, we clearly identified that family farms would be CRA eligible, which I'm hopeful will allow capital to flow in, because the ability to get CRA credit will allow institutions to do that, as a very attractive lending sector. As far as the distribution chain, I don't know what I could comment. I did hear, a lot of small farmers, their crops, they couldn't get them out of the fields and because of the workers and the COVID, and then they couldn't get them into the distribution channel. So your point was a good one. The grocery stores could sell everything they could get into the stores, but unfortunately, a lot of the small farmers couldn't get it out of the fields and into the stores. And so, it might be something to look at to say, well, what would we do if we were faced with this again, from the standpoint of being able to get that product? Because as you know, that product often sometimes can have a 2 or 3 day window. If it's not picked and distributed, then unfortunately that results in destruction for the family farm.
And our lack of CDFIs in rural areas, that's also another interesting comment, which is the ones who serve the farmers. We don't have them. There's not incentive to be on the rural areas, on the CDFI.
Right.
Yeah, I want to call Robert McLaughlin of NCDE. Robert, you have 2 questions, if you don't mind asking Joseph Otting directly.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much. And in fact, one question, Joseph, is definitely for you, and the others is maybe Faith to your panel and the members of your board. One is, I'm wondering about with regard to the digital divide, Joseph. My understanding is, of course, that the modernized CRA that you've developed is much clearer about addressing the digital divide as a set of CRA creditworthy opportunities. And I'm wondering if Faith, if as well as Joseph, what your thoughts are about the potential role of particularly native CDFIs and others serving diverse communities to pool CRA funding for broadband investment in inner city as well as rural areas that are underserved by affordable broadband.
So Robert, interesting enough, prior to even the modernization, the OCC has given broadband in rural communities credit for CRA. In fact, Barry did a video that we had on our OCC website of a couple projects that were done under CRA qualifications to make sure people, again, this gets back to that whole thing of no list, no understanding, often relying upon a particular individual's historical knowledge of CRA, and constantly us trying to put out there things that qualify. But broadband in the rural America or in a low to moderate income area always was intended to be CRA qualified.
I do know that. In fact, Barry collaborated. We collaborated with Barry on that video.
Oh, good.
And so I'm very beholden to you and Barry for quite some time now because of that. I'm really wondering about your perspective on CDFIs and the National Diversity Coalition's perspective about CDFIs, because our read on this is that, as you're saying, prior to modernization, but now, especially with modernization, seems to me that one of the other participants mentioned just a few moments ago the issue about rural isolation and lack of access to the CRA and other resources. I'm thinking that CRA credit could be given through CDFIs for pooling CRA dollars to finance affordable broadband in rural areas. And just wondering, I would like to propose that to be on the agenda for ongoing conversation moving forward, but wondering if that makes sense to you all or not.
And when you say,
CDFIs,
Robert, when you say pooling, what do you mean by pooling? Because if it's a CDFI, clearly, and they're doing those activities, they would be CRA credit, qualified and should get credit. So when you say pooling, meaning a group of CDFIs come together, create the dollars?
It could be it could be multiple CDFIs or one CDFI. It's just, am I right in understanding? It sounds like I am from what you're saying, Joseph, that CDFIs could really are uniquely well positioned to support addressing inequitable access to affordable broadband in rural areas, because CDFIs can span not only the traditional CRA assessment areas, but they have more flexibility. And I think the CDFIs, in other words, I think the folks on this call have collectively and individually a lot of potential opportunity to really lead an effort with CRA dollars to support broadband investment at scale.
But maybe Jackson can make a comment too.
Sorry.
I think that CDFIs are ready and willing to help, and the ones that we work with, native CDFIs, more than half of them are in rural areas. I think there probably are ways to think about that creatively when we're talking about accessing broadband or developing broadband and so capabilities. So that'd take a little bit of work, but we're not afraid of a little bit of work, are we?
Yeah. Everett, do you also have a comment?
Yeah, Joseph, just a question for you. As it relates to community development and LMI communities, as you all know, or as you well know, we'd love to have banks that look like us, that serve us, and that are located by us. In the plan, are there any thoughts, or have you put any thought around how to improve the number, the size of Native American banks, Latino banks, African American banks, commonly called MDIs, as we all know? Because, I'll run some quick numbers for you that I ran through. I don't know if it's correct, but 20 trillion in the US, 200 billion in the minority deposit institutions, 130 billion Asian, 60 billion Latinx, 5 billion Native, and then 4.3 billion for African American. Pretty low, as you can imagine. So how do we support these institutions, kind of going forward?
Yes. So, Everett, you may understand and appreciate, but for people on the call that weren't, we also found as we traveled across the United States that a lot of people in minority deposit institutions felt that they were not CRA qualified. And again, that was in my mind, miscommunication. We've clarified now that both equity and debts into minority deposit institutions are CRA related activities. And so I think it starts there, but I also think it's really disappointing to me with the population of Black and Latinos and Asians that we do not have more financial institutions that are serving the needs of those communities by people from their communities. And I think that's one of the things that would be great for us to figure out. I'd be happy to join dialogue and conversations about how do we get organizations in today's world to organize, bank and serve those communities across. There are some, very, 130 million people, 15% of the population, 30 to 40 million people that could be served in the institution. Technology today of the internet and associations, you don't have to be in somebody's backyard to serve their banking needs.
Agreed. Thank you, Joseph.
Pastor Andre Chappelle from Compton has a question. Andre? His question, Andre, are you in? Yes, go ahead.
Good to see me. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Joseph Otting, for this time. My question, of course, being an African American and being able to be on a call like this, my thoughts are obviously going to be relative to the context of what our nation is dealing with, and the context we're in right now, dealing with the African Americans and systemic racism. And so when we consider systemic and systems, I think the greatest impact that can be made is always going to be financial. So when I look at, I'm in Compton, I'm in South LA, and, being a part of NDC, discovering what CRA is all about, I'm not seeing, and nobody I know in our communities is seeing the impact of CRA and how it's affecting our communities. And so I'm asking why is that not in the homes of those who it's supposed to be? Of course, we're the lowest. We're probably at the bottom I'm hearing the statistics of Everett and others. We're at the bottom, and I'm not seeing the CRA really having an impact. So my question is, how do we give some more accountability to those who's getting this and who's supposed to be distributing this amongst the community, and or even how do someone like me who has a heart for this and I'm in the trenches, how do we become more, have a bigger play at the table to make certain that there is an impact on the block, where we actually serve at? That's my question.
Was your name Al?
Andre.
Andre Chapter.
Andre.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Andre. I could not agree with you more. And the system that we had prior to this rule, there was no measurement, there was no disclosure, there was no identification. You could not tell what was being done in your community. And that's one of the things we did in this modernization, is to say, what is the measurement? Where is it? The only place to really find what is being done in your communities if you went bank by bank by bank by bank, which very difficult. I mean, it'd be tough for me to do that, more or less, it's not familiar with those performance evaluations. I'm hopeful, whether it's 1 year or 2 years or 3 years from now, that we're going to be able to have detailed data where you're going to be able to see what's being done in your community. I think the only way you can make sure it's happening is you got to have the information. Today, that information has not been made available to you. And that's one of the key things that we were going to change.
Thank you, Andre. Last question before I call in the board chair of National Diversity Coalition, Jinson. We have Leonard Johnson also, grew up in Compton as well. Leonard?
You're on mute, Leonard.
I just unmuted. Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
You're in. Right, we can hear you.
I unmuted. Yeah, Joseph, I think I was asking this, it was basically how can the CRA help financial institutions map out the digital landscape for artificial intelligence, cloud migration for small businesses? Because if we think about Eric Smith's book in 2013, The New Digital Age, so much wealth has been created by Google. He's the former chairman and CEO of Google. And I'm in artificial intelligence and at Stanford as well, and all of these things. Yet we talk about African-American community. I'm being an African-American myself, much greater than 45, much older than 45. So I've seen all of this. And that tech world is more empowering than anywhere else. And that's really the new wealth creation for the next 100 years, when we're able to pass wealth on by generations. And for some reason, I don't see Joseph.
Yeah, so what was your question? Your question is, how do we use CRA to help move low to moderate income communities in that direction?
I'm sorry. I can barely, for some reason, I'm having a bad connection now. So I did type it in the chat. Maybe Faith can read it off.
The question is, how can CRA work with financial institutions to have small business become part of the new digital landscape, artificial intelligence, cloud development, mobile access, and also talk about the digital banking?
Yeah. So on the small business, any loan up to $1.6 million in a small business to help them do that transformation would be CRA qualified. So there's a whole avenue available of small business lending that can be CRA qualified. On the digital side, clearly we tried to focus on digital banks that are using, deposits from communities. And we think, the best way I can describe that is now we're expecting those banks that get over 50% of their deposits from outside their assessment areas, and those where they take more than 5% of the deposits, that they will then go into those and support income activities. We measured on that. So I think those dollars flow in and help with the digitalization as well.
Thank you, Leonard. I don't know if Tony Recess also has a question on digital banking. Tony, are you there? If not, we can always call Joseph later. So Jen, would you like to come in? By the way, this is not just a National Asian American Coalition. This is really National Diversity Coalition virtual coffee break as well. So I'd like to call in Board Chair Jen to give her observation. Jen?
Thank you, Faith. Good morning. And Mr. Otting, thank you so much for spending this morning with all of us. And I just wanted to reiterate how important the CRA reform is. And I think everyone should take note that this effort that the 31st Comptroller has taken to high effort is not a reaction to a crisis. We did not have pandemic when this all started. We did not have some crazy national crisis, but it was really a response as to how he's describing corporate social responsibility to be important for all business sectors. And I think what we're forgetting as a community, as stakeholders of this society, is that community reinvestment doesn't need to be a regulation. However, in banking industry, it is, and it has been for the last 40 years. Our job as stakeholders of this society is to elevate this effort to make it cross-sector. And I think Mr. Otting said it very clearly, this $465 billion per year generated through CRA efforts, we need to boost it. And if it's 600 trillion or 800 trillion, however it is, for all of us down here on the grassroots area, that number is mind-blowing. But this is not just the responsibility of the banking sector. So I looked at some numbers, and I just, for the context of discussion here, I want everybody to kind of reassess the importance of corporate social responsibility. And in response to COVID-19, many of the tech companies have responded to how they can help the community. I think that's a great start, but really is not enough. Let's talk about Apple. Apple just announced in April, they donate a portion of sales from red products, just 200 million. Facebook, 20 million. Amazon, and I'll come back to Amazon, but Google, for example, I think they're perhaps a highly published number, 800 million pledge a donation. And so when we go back to even Netflix, it's about 100 million. Now, these are big numbers, but considering their industry size, it's really a small number. And year-end 2018, the U.S. financial sector succumbs to about $17.9 trillion in asset size, whereas U.S. tech industry is about 32% of the entire global tech industry. And here we are responding to COVID-19 with these numbers that can be publicized for marketing purposes, but it's really not enough. And we like to talk about Amazon a lot because they are one of the largest tech companies out there. 20 million in diagnostic initiatives to accelerate COVID-19 research. 21 million euros to support those most affected by COVID-19. And then the CEO, founder, Jeff Bezos, donated 100 million to Feeding America, etc. The reason why I'm mentioning these numbers that were published is because now as citizens of the globe, we're recognizing how important it is to close the gap in wealth and inequality. I think what is happening at the congressional level, or knowing that this CRA reform is going to be discussed at a higher level in Senate, we're overlooking the fact that this is a perfect opportunity for all of us to be responsible for the communities that we so enjoy being part of. And perhaps this passion that Controller Otting has is not a personal agenda, but it certainly, I believe, is a righteous decision that he made when he took on that position. And if you were to ask NDC, we're going to be standing at the front line all around it till this comes to an end. As a citizen of the United States, we need to recognize the importance of this reform. It's not just about the banking industry. This is about bringing solutions to a greater issue that is at hand, that's been really dominating a lot of the communities that we're concerned about. And so I just wanted to give a big shout out to OCC, the thousands of men and women who spent hours in investigating not only investigating, assessing and accepting comments, and what is not just doing due diligence, but truly believing in what needs to happen in order to really move the needle. And so National Diversity Coalition is not only pleased to embrace this full initiative, but we're going to really make an effort, even if people don't care about it at the end of the day. This is something that needs to happen nationwide and cross-sector. And so, Controller, I just want to congratulate you for taking on this cross. This is a big burden. It's been a tremendous journey just watching you as a business leader initially and taking on this huge responsibility as a regulator to not only inspire us who are working with the community firsthand, but making industries accountable. And so I know that Faith gave me a few minutes to close the session, and perhaps I'm going a little bit more
I
in a
still have
broader
some
sense.
questions, actually, Jim, because a few more questions would like to ask.
Sure. But I wanted to thank you personally. And I think there has to be more Mr. Ottings in all sectors. And how can we replicate you? We just really thank you for all your work. Congratulations.
That's what NDC has to do. In fact, we're doing a petition. It's going to be on Change.org. We have a petition after this virtual coffee break. We're going to be passing the petition. So please sign the petition. I know it's going to be appealed in the Congress. We'll see what happened there, and it will go to the Senate. But my experience is when NAAC and NDC fought on the national mortgage settlement, it took us 7 years to fight for what's right. But God knows what they need to do, and we won, we prevailed. And I always believe, and I believe that this CRA reform will be implemented. So there's some raise hand here, Fred Lambright. You wanna ask Joseph the question?
Good morning, Joseph. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question in terms of the pandemic. I think that a lot of banks are switching and addressing the needs, I guess, related to the pandemic. But there are other needs out there, that the types of requests that we were getting for funding, grants, and donations, those aren't that aren't related to the pandemic. I think I've been hearing that a lot of people in the industry, or some of the industry, was saying that, well, we aren't focused on that right now. Everything is related to pandemic. And I think, but those other needs never did go away. They're still existing. Have you heard anything about the balance between banks that have doing forbearances and extensions and other things that impact probably their income, with the growing need to increase the amount of funding going out to support both the needs of businesses impacted by a pandemic, as well as the normal business needs of striking, I guess, some sort of a balance between supporting the needs of the communities and businesses.
Yeah, I think most of the banks that I've had dialogue with, they view the COVID-19 as like another layer of support for the community versus replacing what they're doing. But I haven't heard they say, look, we only spend it in the past, we're only going to spend $1, and so some of it's going to go to COVID. I think most of the financial institutions had said, we're going to still support the $1, but now we're going to add another 30 or 40 cents on top of that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any final comment? We missed you, Comptroller. We missed you, Joseph.
I'll be back. I'm going to be in LA during July and August, so definitely we'll get a chance to say hello to everybody. But first of all, Paige, what I want to say is, we created a process to allow each of you from your communities to go to banks and have a better understanding of CRA. And I know that's not always easy, but use your to help you with that, because now you have the tools to understand what did a bank do, where are they, how are they doing it, and what are the dollar amount going into the community. Information, the new rule that you've ever had in the history of CRA information and use it to. So with that, Faith, thank you very much for inviting me. Hopefully I get an invitation. And I'm happy to come back anytime that I can talk. I would love some conversations with small ticket teams. I think that's another really important thing, that small ticket lending is done fair and appropriate for people and doesn't put them into a lending trap. But we all know, people have emergencies, a truck breaks down, something in the house goes bad where you need short-term dollars, and you need a bank that's willing to work with you. And I think we put forward a good approach for that as well. So.
Well, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Jackson. Thank you, B. Thank you, Everett. Thank you, Jen. Thank you to all the NDC Board of Directors, NAAC, and thank you for the staff for doing this. And this is, thank you for the comments, helpful conversation. And this is all what we have to do. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep, it's like a multi-level marketing approach. We need to explain to those unbelievers the truth of CRA. And for those that are so against it, they can go directly to OCC, FDIC, Barry Whitis, Grovetta, and now with Brian Brooks, the acting controller. I'm sure he's as good as Joseph. But I know they're always open. So if you are so against it, what I learned yesterday on the service, if you are so angry, you cannot think straight. You cannot have good reasons. So pray for it, talk to the positive people, and most likely you'll have a positive answer. And with the pandemic, there is no time anymore to keep fighting. We need to hold hands. It showed in the protest. We know the problems. We know the solutions. And we cannot run out of beautiful, intelligent people in America. And I love America. If you look at it, we are still living in the greatest country. So have a great COVID week. We're going to continue for a while. I'm always open. We've been working, all of us have been working very hard. I want to thank the administration for all the work that they're providing to the small businesses, FHFA, Fannie and Freddie on the forbearances. I think everyone are more creative in creating solutions. So I want to thank you again. And Mr. Joseph Otting, you're dear to us. We know where your heart is, and whatever criticism that you're hearing, you have a lot more that believes in you and appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.